evening, I'm Byron Scott with the CTV News Update. While national numbers have trended up, COVID-19 stats in Maryland are improving. That's according to Governor Larry Hogan. The statewide positivity rate has fallen to 4.5%, and current hospitalizations have dropped to 403. 3 people have died due to COVID-19 over the last 24 hours. Well, in 1996, the state of Mississippi became the last state in the Union to ratify the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery. And last week, Mississippi became the last state to eliminate the Confederate battle emblem from its state flag.
By a vote of 37-14, the bill passes.
I honestly cried. I was so overwhelmed with joy.
Leanna Range Norwood shed tears of joy when she heard those words. It was the moment state lawmakers in Mississippi voted to take down a long-standing symbol of the Confederacy.
There's a groundswell of change and movement that makes me feel really proud to be a Mississippian, whereas before it was a little embarrassing. Not a little embarrassing, it was embarrassing. You tell someone you're from Mississippi and then you can just recite the jokes or the comments that will come.
For 125 years, the Mississippi flag, which included the Confederate battle emblem, flew over the Magnolia State. When lawmakers voted to take it down, Range Norwood says she thought about many things.
I thought about the fact that when I worked in D.C. on the Hill, that flag was sitting out in the hallway of the Russell Senate office building, and how embarrassing it was to go in there every day. I thought about Benny Thompson, our current congressman, the only black representative we have from the state of Mississippi, and how he will now be able to put a flag outside of his office so that people will be able to identify him as a representative from the state of Mississippi.
Range Norwood comes from a civil rights family in Jackson. Her great-grandfather was the Reverend Robert L.T. Smith. Known as the minister of the Jackson Civil Rights Movement, Smith was the first black to run for Congress from Mississippi since Reconstruction. He was also a frequent target of the Mississippi Sovereignty Commission, a state agency that spied on people connected to the civil rights movement. He was also questioned as a witness in connection with the 1963 death of Medgar Evers.
I think his reaction today would be well done. I think they did so much consistent work to move forward and power forward that would have been expected if they had something like this come up during the time when he was actively involved. Another piece of symbolism that I'd like to bring up is his son, Robert L.T. Smith Jr. was buried on Thursday, and this vote took place on Saturday and Sunday. And I thought about him. I thought about what he would think. I thought about the fact that he and Medgar Evers were friends. Uncle Robert, as I fondly call him and refer to him, was the best man in Medgar and Merle Evers' wedding.
Voting yes or yay. Barnett, Blackman, Blackwell, Blunt, Boyd.
Lawmakers voted 91-23 in the House and 37-14 in the Senate, but not before an amendment was offered to place the issue before the voters, as was done in 2001, when 64% voted to keep the flag. Saturday's amendment was tabled, clearing the way for a vote. As for that amendment, was that an effort, do you think, to keep the flag flying?
Yes. Not only was it it was an effort to keep the flag flying in perpetuity. They were not trying to put it on this particular ballot. They were trying to put it on a ballot in 2021. So then again, could possibly have failed by not being a part of a major election. It felt like a sneak attack.
Governor Tate Reeves signed the measure on Tuesday.
It is now law.
A 9-member commission will now create a new flag design, which will go before the voters for approval in November.
The flag wasn't representative of the entire state of Mississippi. Not at all.
Byron Scott, CTV News. 3 minority owners of the Burgundy and Gold football team won out. They say they are not happy with majority owner Dan Snyder and are soliciting for potential buyers. The businessmen own a combined 40% of the team. Meantime, the franchise has announced it will undergo a thorough review of its nickname. FedEx, which is the title sponsor of the team's stadium, formally asked the team to change its name. CTV asked people what they thought about a possible name change. Fans have been calling for it for a long time. Native Americans have been calling for it a long time, and the team didn't budge until corporate America decided to say something.
Money talks. money talks. And so I think it is overdue.
The name has been around for many, many years. And if it's now that people look at it as if it's offensive, I think it's too late. So if it needs to be changed for whatever reason, yes. But if we're going to look at it as if it's offensive, but I don't see a rationale behind that.
The Maryland State Board of Elections submits its final recommendations to the governor regarding the November election. The board came up with 3 options for Hogan to consider. One recommendation would be to hold the November election by mail only. Other options would be a complete in-person election or a combination of both in-person and mail-in ballots. The governor will have the final say-so on this matter. And Maryland schools and restaurants had a July 1st deadline to stop using styrofoam food containers and cups, but Governor Hogan recently extended that deadline to October 1st due to the pandemic. It was a move that upset the sponsor of the legislation. Patricia Vallone has that story.
This was really important legislation. Over half the state already bans styrofoam in food packaging. It's terrible for the environment and it's awful for public health. The styrofoam that we get our takeout Chinese food or something in, first off, the heat emits cancerous chemicals. Don't ever drink coffee or tea from a styrofoam cup. You're kind of drinking cancer. But styrofoam can't be recycled. It doesn't break down. It doesn't biodegrade. It's lightweight. It blows around, gets into our waterways, and the fish eat it, and then we eat the fish. Bad idea.
And he gave this 3-month extension because there was 18 months for businesses to implement it,
Right.
and then the pandemic came along. Why do you think this is still a bad idea not to give the extra 3 months?
Well, not only did we give 18 months for people to use up their current supply, so how many people have a storage closet that has more than a year and a half of styrofoam cups and bowls? And, that's just crazy, and they got lots of advance notice. There's a waiver possibility that's in the legislation. And when it became law, the styrofoam ban became law years ago in Montgomery County, in Prince George's County, in DC, Baltimore City passed it, Annapolis passed it, and then Anne Arundel. In each case, waivers were offered. If there's a hardship in getting rid of your current supply, then just ask for a little more time. Not one small business, not one faith institution, not one nonprofit has asked for a waiver in any of those jurisdictions. We didn't think a delay was a good idea, and I don't think it's needed.
The delay actually will put this until what date are we talking about it becoming effective?
So it was supposed to be July 1st, and instead 3 months later, it'll be October 1st. And it may not be the biggest issue out there right now, but it's a very important step. We were role models for the nation. Several other states used our legislation to model their own laws, and it's important for the Chesapeake Bay, for all our waterways, and for our public health.
A tree crashes into a garage, sending 21 people to the hospital. It happened yesterday afternoon during a birthday celebration in Pasadena. The partygoers were under a large detached garage when a storm hit the area and toppled the tree. One person was critically injured. 6 were transported with serious injuries. Maryland State Police arrest 90 people for impaired driving over the holiday weekend. That's a slight increase compared to last year. Troopers also issued 4,100 traffic citations and about 3,800 warnings. Well, one local business is struggling to stay afloat during these tough economic times. Little Smiling Faces, a daycare center with 2 locations in Prince George's, was forced to close its doors in March. More than 3 months later, the facility has reopened at 1 location at limited capacity. Alcatira Jones chatted with the owner recently, and we'll have a full report on CTV News later in the week. ABC flashcards are nothing new for families with children, but a local children's book author is hoping to change the narrative with new African-American-inspired educational tools. Keisha Butts has more.
A is for Africa, spanning from sea to shining sea. And B is for Black, the richest color in the galaxy.
Popular children's book author Marquette Shepard is back at it again with a new set of educational tools. What started out as a book of poems has turned into a deck of ABC flashcards and a poster. Shepard hopes these new materials will change the perception of African Americans in the world.
I'm more likely to talk about rocket ships or see a doctor in my everyday life than see some tragic social injustice on play. So because we're more likely to see doctors in our everyday life and see graduates in our everyday lives, we need to have those pictures represented in our educational tools, like what I'm doing, in our books that we read for fun. And also, I'm gonna even take it a step further and say in all of our children's TV programming.
So far, Shepherd has sold materials to families in New York, California, and even the Netherlands. For more information or to even purchase the cards, visit glowstreamtv.com. This is Keisha Butts with CTV News.
Hi everybody and welcome to this CTV Sports Report. Tonight we are talking Major League Baseball. The Baltimore Orioles continue with Spring Training 2.0 at Camden Yards right behind me. Now one would think with players having 3 months off that they would show up and need to get back into shape, especially pitchers who are on a schedule. But here in Baltimore, that's not the case. The pitchers have kept themselves in shape, kept themselves on the schedule, and are ready to go in July.
I think I'm very close. Over the quarantine, I had built up to 5 innings, 75 pitches. But since, the testing and the couple days off we had to take, we kind of bumped it back down to 465. I finished strong. I didn't feel any sort of different fatigue or anything like that. I felt strong, and I feel like if I had to go out there tomorrow and pitch, I could.
Throwing 2-inning sim games and throwing was normal for where we would be in July here. For me, like I threw live yesterday and I felt like I could, pitch in a game, major league game. I know there weren't fans, so that's how it's going to be this year. But yeah, I feel ready, completely ready. And I was ready the week and a half we had left of spring training. So I stayed right there and honestly progressed a lot more from there.
It's going to be weird. It's going to be different. But the weirdest part is all these games count more than they ever have, and you're not going to feel that energy of these games counting from the fans. So it's kind of a mix of both, which I think it might take some getting used to. But I think overall, I think this team, especially for how young we are, we're able to create energy in the dugout and on the field. So I think we kind of have an advantage with that.
Soccer, NWSL Challenge Cup, the Washington Spirit taking on the Portland Thorns in opening round action. Let's head out to Utah for the action. We pick it up in the second half, scoreless until right now. Megan Klingenberg with the ball on her foot into the area. Great header by Lindsey Horan into the back of the net for the score, and the Thorns take a 1-0 lead. Later in the second half, Dorian Bailey with the corner kick, puts it into the area. Great heel kick by Ashley Sanchez onto the head of Sam Staub, and she puts it into the back of the net for the score. And we are tied at 1. Watch this again. Watch this heel kick by Sanchez. They get the ball onto the head of Staub, and that makes the score 1-1. Closing minutes of the game now. It's Lindsey Horan again putting the ball on net, but Audrey Bledsoe with the big save to keep the game tied, and that's the way it would end. 1-1, a draw. Spirit head coach Richie Burke talked about his team's play in the second half and that amazing play by Sanchez on the corner kick.
I don't know what Sanchito said, but that was not a rehearsed play, and that was not something that we expected. I don't think she expected it. I think that was more like a kung fu move, but, we'll take it under the circumstances. She's obviously a bright young talent, and we're loving what she's doing for our football club. She's one of the kids I think is really benefiting from these matches. But if she told you that was a rehearsed play, we do have a short one, but it actually goes to her feet. It doesn't go around about her hip, and she certainly doesn't throw a kung fu move, that's for sure. Little tactical adjustment where we now stepped our fullbacks a little bit wider and higher and asked Sanchez and Kumi to come into little pockets, and that created problems for their midfield and allowed us a little bit more space. And I think, a couple of times I was just talking at the end, we got them on the counter and we were driving in a numbers up or even numbers situation, and we were just a little bit wasteful with our passes, just a little bit wasteful in our interplay, especially when we were driving at speed, which I think we'll work on and try and get a little bit better.
Now the Spirit will conclude opening round play next Sunday when they take on the Houston Dash. And that is your CTV Sports Report.
And that wraps up CTV News. I'm Byron Scott. Good night.